If you or your family is touched by autism, learn more about Fredi's foundation at #PopTheTab at FrediThePizzaMan.com. That's Fredi, thepizzaman.com, or email FrediThePizzaman@gmail.com.
This is Inside the Pizza Oven, the podcast that explores the best, most innovative, and relevant pizzerias and restaurateurs in America. Now here's your host, Fredi the Pizza Man, Fredi Bello.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Inside the Pizza Oven, powered by Fredi the Pizza Man Foundation for Autism. Find all the shows on iTunes or anywhere you find your podcast. Also, all social media platforms by searching me, Fredi the Pizza Man. Also, check out the video streaming portion of the show, Inside the Pizza Oven, on YouTube. And please subscribe and share. Today's guest, we'll get to him momentarily, Brian Rzeppa, author of You Are Hired, A Guide to Working in Sports. So he wrote a book. We're going to talk to him about it, an interesting book. And just wanted to mention, normally we film the show face-to-face, which you find on YouTube. And we've done many of the shows with former college basketball coach Greg Campy, Lions radio voice Dan Miller, Super Bowl winner Eddie Murray. You're going to find L. Bubba Baker on there. We'll be recording with him very soon. Former Lion, former NFL player L. Bubba Baker. Everyone remembers him. One of my childhood heroes as a 10-year-old kid. So, race car driver Armani Williams, actress, model, Jamie Kinton. So find those shows and many of the shows on the YouTube page, again, Inside the Pizza Oven. The next few weeks, we just decided that we're going to record over the phone due to COVID. We want to keep everyone that's working on the show safe, also the guests safe, and, and the host as well, too. So we're just trying to do the right thing, and we're going to get back to filming. In the meantime, we're going to record a few shows. L. Bubba Baker. Brian Rzeppa, he's going to join us in a minute. When we get back to filming, I expect former Lion quarterback Eric Hipple to be here, so I'm really looking forward to that as well. So keep a lookout for that and subscribe. Lastly, the show is about the foundation, Fredi the Pizza Man Foundation for Autism. So I encourage you to check out the website, FrediThePizzaMan.com, and please donate. Help us equip more sensory rooms in the state of Michigan. You'll see the list of schools that we've already currently worked with, 17 schools and counting. So please, if you can donate and help, we'd really appreciate it. And big thank you to the show's sponsor, Les Stanford Cadillac Chevrolet, there in Dearborn, Michigan. So stay tuned on the other side, and we'll get to Brian Rzeppa. Welcome back to Inside the Pizza Oven. As promised, author of You Are Hired, A Guide to Working in Sports, Brian Rzeppa. Brian, welcome in, my man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it, man. I know, we talked a little bit off air. I was telling you that normally we video stream, but because of COVID, we decided to record over the phone, and I really appreciate you giving us a few minutes and talking about your book. So, I had a list written out a couple weeks ago, and, the big news happened yesterday as we're recording, the Matt Patricia, Bob Quinn firing with Detroit Lions. So I definitely I penciled that in this morning. I said, I've got to ask Brian about it. We're going to touch on that later. But, first of all, let the people get to know Brian and a little bit of your inspiration. What made you write the book?
Yeah, so I have my undergrad degree is in sports management, and so throughout the time that I was getting my undergrad degree and after that, one of my first jobs was working in sports with the Toledo Mudhens. And so, just kind of being a fan myself and going through that process of, going through the educational process and then working in it myself, I was just kind of curious of, how people go on to, get into these top level roles like general managers, athletic directors, coaches. And so I was just curious as to how people get into those and, how, what a path would look like for me to get into that. And so, I just spoke to around 15, 20 of people within these top roles. And I guess they kind of just laid out that roadmap for people that want to work in sports, or even just, I guess, for the sports fan that is, like you said, with the Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn, obviously that's going to be a big thing in Detroit now. So for that sports fan of learning how these roles get filled and how these people get into their jobs and then what these jobs actually look like on a day-to-day basis. So I just kind of wanted to inform people, regardless of what their interests were, of actually working in sports or just kind of being a sports fan in general.
Well, how long ago were you with the Mud Hens, and what did you do with the Mud Hens?
Yeah, so I had worked in communications for a couple of years. The most recent season, I think, was the 2017 season. I was working in communications, doing the social media, and working in media relations and things like that.
So a person that's getting into sports, whether it's it can be anything. I mean, it could be a player, it could be a general manager, a coach, a player, behind the scenes. How important is communication from a team to the fan aspect?
Yeah, it's crucial. You talk about, obviously without the fans, and you see this now is with how much, even just from a financial aspect, how much teams are losing money without the fans in the stands. But ultimately, to be able to communicate and to be able to get your vision across is going to be like a crucial part of the interview process for you. If you're not able to sell the ownership and the organization upon what your vision is for that organization, how you're going to connect with the community, ultimately you're probably not going to land that job. And once you do land that job, you're able to communicate that kind of vision to ownership. Then you could go about communicating that to the community. And I think to kind of not to stress too much on the Patricia Quinn aspect, you saw a lot of things that kind of got Patricia off on the wrong foot in Detroit with the fans. One of the first press conferences that he had, he told the reporter to sit up straight in his seat, and I think that that really just kind of rubbed a lot of people the wrong way.
Yep.
And it really just got people off on the wrong foot with Patricia. And I mean, obviously now he's not employed any longer, so he was never able to recover.
The scandal, the scandal in Texas, that when he was in college, came up to bite him, and when he got hired with the Lions, so that's another thing that didn't start really well. You hire a coach, and then all of a sudden, I mean you got to think about the coach who hired the coach was his buddy, so he stood up there and said, "Hey, I didn't have to do that much of a search. This is what the NFL tells us to do, and I did the minimum." And when there's many different fans, but I always say there's a lot of smart fans, and I don't think they get enough credit. And the really smart fans, they can see through a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, even just for the casual fan, that's never a good look when one of the first things that you hear about a new incoming coach is, this revelation about something that happened 20 years ago. And, the Lions as an organization, really they need to be better than that. And they need to be able to get out in front of that and they need to be proactive in getting that news out and to be communicating their side of the story as opposed to being reactive and kind of just responding to whatever happens.
It's funny you say that. That's one of my pet peeves. I live by. I always believe in being proactive versus reactive. When you're proactive, you're pushing, you're trying to do the right thing, whether it works or not. You're just trying to do the right thing, and you gave it your all. But when you're reactive, that's when all the mistakes happen, isn't it?
Right. And I mean, you see that happen within organizations. You see the real strong organizations is, they're the ones that are proactive. You see the Patriots last year with Antonio Brown, obviously they took a big risk on him, and then, they saw this news coming out, and then they're just done. They clean their hands of it and they're over it. And, as opposed to the Lions where, I guess you're just reacting and not really making any moves, and you're just kind of, taking it as it comes, unfortunately. And obviously the Patriots have worked out a little bit better than the Lions, unfortunately.
Well, I'll give you a perfect example, Brian. The Green Bay Packers, New England Patriots, Kansas City Chiefs, Those teams are proactive, and what do? They go draft quarterbacks when you have quarterbacks that have already won, and you keep drafting them, and you don't draft them in the 6th, 7th round. You draft them pretty high, 1st, 2nd, 3rd round. You develop them, and then you make that decision. Do we stay with him, or we get rid of the guy that's making a lot of money, or do we trade him? Versus the Lions, you have a quarterback here, whether you like him or not, whether he's a good guy off the field, and which he is, and all that. He's never won here in 12 years, and you don't draft anybody. And now you're in a position where he has gotten 2 general managers. Now, I don't want to say him personally, but on his watch, 2 general managers have been fired and 3 head coaches. And you've never drafted a quarterback within the first 5 rounds of any of those drafts to bring anybody in. That's not proactive thinking, and you wonder why they've never won.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something that, Quinn had said initially was something that he wanted to continue to do. And I think it was within one of his first years, he took Brad Kaya from Miami in like the 6th round or something.
Yeah.
And people thought that was interesting. But yeah, as big of, a Stafford fan I may or may not be, it's weird to not kind of think about the next step within your organization, regardless of how good he is or, however you feel about him. You do need to be thinking of that next step, and especially when you consider his injury history. And like you said, they really haven't won with him. How much you want to pin on that versus him versus the organization, that's a different conversation. But yeah, you look at the Patriots and they draft Jimmy Garoppolo, they draft Jacoby Brissett. The Chiefs, they draft Patrick Mahomes when they have a solid starter in Alex Smith. You need to be thinking of like, what's my next step? How am I going to get to the next level as an organization versus, we're happy with this guy, so let's just keep rolling with him in perpetuity.
You're listening to Brian Rzeppa, author of "You Are Hired: A Guide to Working in Sports." Before we move on, Brian, your book, I'm assuming you can find it on Amazon. Anywhere
Absolutely.
else? Tell us a little bit about it.
Just Amazon. Amazon's definitely the easiest way to find it. Barnes and Noble, if you prefer that way. But yeah, Amazon is definitely the easiest way to find it.
So if you're getting into sports, whatever capacity it may be, you might want to. You definitely want to check out this book, Guide to Working in Sports. You learn a lot from it. So again, the proactive, reactive. You get the book, you read it, you're being proactive. You may learn a few things, and it may not help you today, but it may help you tomorrow, right? So it's always a good thing. Not to give away a lot of the names, who are some of the names that you spoke to in the book?
Yeah, so some of the top names would be Phil Fulmer, who's the athletic director for the University of Tennessee, former longtime football coach for them.
Yes, great name.
Scott Strickland, the athletic director of the University of Florida. John Cohen, the athletic director of Mississippi State. So didn't intentionally go about getting all the SEC athletic directors, but it just kind of ended up going that way. And so to see a lot of names like that, Jack Ferreira, who ran a couple teams in the NHL, Ken Herrick, who ran a couple teams in the NFL, Dan O'Brien, the former general manager of the Cincinnati Reds. So kind of just a little bit of everything from every kind of college and professional sport.
So when we spoke a few weeks ago, the big news came out. Is the Miami Marlins or Florida Marlins? I'm so lost on that. Is the Miami Marlins?
I think Miami, yeah.
Okay. The Miami Marlins hired a woman general manager, first ever, Kim Ning, first ever woman general manager. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, she's interviewed for a ton of roles over the years, and I think that she's spent something like 30 years within Major League Baseball. So, to just kind of see a culmination of her hard work. She's worked in, player personnel roles for years. She was with the San Francisco Giants, among other teams. And, you look at it from like a hiring point of view, and, you really can't find like a more qualified candidate than her. And, like I said, she had a ton of different opportunities to interview for these top roles, but to actually see it come to fruition and, her land this role, it's fantastic and a huge step forward for women that want to work in sports. Obviously it's a male dominated industry, so to to have that kind of representation is huge.
Yeah, I believe we saw yesterday the place kicker for the Vanderbilt college football team, a woman, first ever field goal kicker in top 5 or top Power 5 division football. I can't think of her name right now, but she kicked some field goals, so pretty neat.
Yeah, that's too bad that Vanderbilt's offense couldn't get anything going for her, but
sounds like the Lions.
Unfortunately, that's how. Yeah, I was gonna say, unfortunately, that's how it goes for kickers sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a few more questions. You know, now that Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn are gone, okay, I got a 2-part question on that. You know, relating to your book, A Guide to Working in Sports. Someone getting into sports, whether it's the front office again, whatever it may be. But we're gonna go to the front office here. Walk us through the process, the interview process. Now the Detroit Lions have to do to hire a general manager and a head coach. Do you hire the general manager first? Which I think most would say yes. But walk us through that. Do they hire the general manager first or the head coach first? And what's the process going to sound like?
Yeah, so I think that obviously they're going to be looking at, all options when they go into the search. And so, you look at an organization like Washington, who brought in Ron Rivera. They wanted to change the entire culture within their organization. So they brought in Ron Rivera, and he's more or less controlling all of football operations. So if the Lions decide to go, down that route, that could be one way that they do it. But ultimately, what they're going to do and what they did when they initially hired Bob Quinn, they're going to bring in a search firm. And so they're going to tell the search firm basically, here's my list of things that I want from the next leader of my organization. And so whether that be, coming from a certain organization or certain organizational background, certain philosophies, things like that, they're going to draw up this, I guess, coaching profile or general manager profile. And they'll just the search firm will go out and they'll, look at their catalog of different candidates, and they'll bring those options to the Lions. They'll interview and, see if any of those work out. And if they don't, they'll just go back to the drawing board. But ultimately, I think that, most organizations would say, like, you need to hire your general manager first, because they're going to be the ones that are setting the tone. And, you don't want to go into a situation where the coach is not picked by the general manager, because I guess it kind of just sets up a situation where, it can be like an uneven reporting structure of like, who is the head coach actually reporting to. Generally, it's going to be the general manager, but if you're not hiring that head coach, then sometimes it can be straight to the owner. And that's what happened with the New York Jets, Adam Gase, before Joe Douglas was brought in. Adam Gase was reporting straight to the owner, and so was the general manager at the time. It sets up a level of dysfunction that I hope the Lions don't go towards. But you saw it with Quinn. They just went with a search firm, and they ended up landing with Quinn. Obviously, that did not work out in the long run, but that's the way that they've got to go. And hopefully they hire a general manager first, unless they hire a head coach to come in and run the whole organization.
Well, here's my thing with that. And again, you listen to Brian Rzeppa, author of You Are Hired, A Guide to Working in Sports. Find his book on Amazon. My question is, when they hired Bob Quinn, this is not a shot at the Lions ownership, but they hired, and this is what it kind of lead to my next question. They hired a president that doesn't have any football experience, so he came before Bob Quinn. So, are the Lions owners qualified to even tell a firm, hey, this is what we're looking for, when they don't even know what they're looking for? Because the president, shouldn't the NFL team have a president that understands football first and foremost before you even, and have an identity before you even think about hiring a general manager and head coach?
Yeah, and I mean, I guess that aspect just really doesn't make sense to me with, how well they run their other aspects of other organizations outside of the Lions. Obviously Ford is one of the, obviously, a stalwart within,
sure.
Worldwide. So, you think that, even if they brought in like a Jim Hackett who was running Ford, he would be fully qualified to know how a football organization runs. And so, you'd think that you would rely on those kind of people that have the experience of of hiring within sports and of knowing what works within a typical environment, because obviously, they've done so in aspects outside of football. So you just have to hope that, this time around that, that they will listen to people that understand football.
Yeah, I mean, you hire, you bring in Bob Quinn, and they never set an identity. That's the number one thing. You never set an identity, and then you keep a head coach and you keep a quarterback from a previous regime. It's like keeping a menu to a failed restaurant, and then you draft one way for one guy, knowing you're going to get rid of him because you're going to hire your buddy, and the first second you can hire your buddy, you're going to get him in here. So then you totally revamp the draft, and the guys that were here, that were in their prime, you push them out. So, again, I get back to not having a president with football experience. Are the Lions going about this the wrong way, not fixing that problem first versus hiring a firm and saying, find us a general manager and a head coach?
Yeah, so I think that, obviously, if you look at it, a lot of the moves within a vacuum, but a lot of the moves that Quinn made in a vacuum, I think that, a lot of those things could be agreeable. Maybe you don't want to pay Darius Slay $20 million. Maybe Quantrell Diggs is, causing problems within the locker room, whatever it may be. But when you don't have a leader in place that can actually execute on the vision that you're setting in place, and you have this, apparently unlikable person in Matt Patricia, those moves are going to become even more unpalatable within the locker room. And so, as you kind of move forward, you need to identify, okay, maybe this vision was the right idea, but this was not the right person to execute it. And obviously, that showed out over week after week within Patricia's tenure here.
Yeah.
And so I think, as we look towards our next option here, you need to see someone that's had, demonstrable success, that is, Matt Patricia did not have, a track record of head coaching success in the NFL. Jim Caldwell, he had Peyton Manning, so I think that was, he probably kind of guided on that. Rod Marinelli did not have success in the NFL. It kind of goes on. Jim Schwartz had not coached at the NFL level. And so I think that, as we kind of identify this next person, whoever it may be, you need to have someone that has an actual winning track record. And I hope that they, as an organization, kind of prioritize that. And, even if you're not a football person, I guess that's not your background as you're going through the hiring process. I can tell you wins and losses. I can tell you, how someone has done from a wins and losses standpoint. So I think that is something they probably need to prioritize as we kind of move towards this next level of the coaching search.
Yeah, we can talk about the Lions all day long and spend hours and hours on them and all their mistakes. And, just to kind of cap that off, I mean, I'm with you. And for me, I would look at a guy like P.J. Fleck, a coach. I know it's very early, and to me, P.J. Fleck, he fits the model of today's NFL, a young, offensive-minded coach. He's built a team at Western Michigan. He's built a team in Minnesota. He's not doing well this year, but he's actually built teams. He's a young offensive mind. He's energetic. I would look at a guy like him. I mean, there's other names out there, so I wouldn't be mad if P.J. Fleck didn't come here. But that's a name I would look at, and I believe in my heart that the Minnesota Vikings are going to peg him. He's in their backyard. The Minnesota Vikings have a lot of offensive talent, and they're gonna peg that guy. Just my opinion. But the Lions, what really upset me about the Lions this year, and I'll be honest with you, a lot of things have upset me over the years, and this is the business end of it. The number 3 pick landed in their hands. Okay, now when you land the number 3 pick in the NFL draft, that guy needs to be an impact on the field and off the field, in my opinion. And what I mean by off the field is he's got to lend value to the franchise. They passed on a quarterback. I wanted to listen. If they found Herbert was their guy, they could have taken Herbert. They researched. I don't. I wanted Tua. Now they end up going to cornerback. 2-part question: how much is it going to set back this franchise, them taking a cornerback versus a quarterback? And how much value would have because I have an answer to that, but I want to hear yours. How much value would that drafting a quarterback at number 3 added to the actual franchise of the Detroit Lions?
Yeah, you know, that was something that I guess kind of really surprised me. Obviously, Okudah was a standout corner at Ohio State, but corner is one of the most notoriously difficult transitions from college to professional level. And you think that a situation like the Quinn and Patricia regime here, you know, you'd think they would have taken an immediate impact player because, you know, they obviously, and you see it now, they're fired. You would have thought that they would pick someone that can have this huge impact right out of the gate, you know, whoever that may be. And so, yeah, you know, you look at how Herbert is doing for the Chargers, and obviously I don't think anyone could have expected him to be playing as well as he has to this point.
Yep.
But, yeah, you know, you when you have the chance to take this organizationally transformational player, I think that you have to do that. Obviously, you know, the Lions do have an out on Stafford's contract, you know, in the near future here, where they're not going to be too hurt financially. And, you know, that's, I guess, again, that's the move a winning organization makes. Obviously, you know, I guess the argument against doing so was that, you know, Quinn and Patricia could not afford to do so. You know, they can't afford to have 3 or 4 years to see how this quarterback plays out. But when you say that, but then when they, you know, take a corner who is not really even playing that much now, I guess the logic doesn't hold up. So
he got rid of Slay.
I think that, yeah, and I think that, you know, they're in a position now where, you know, you see how Herbert is doing, and you see how, you know, Tua's won a couple of games down in Miami. You know, you miss the boat on it, and, you know, that you just have to hope that now they're not going to go chasing or reaching for someone trying to find that next Herbert, whoever it may be. You know, hopefully they you know, take their time and find, you know, the right fit. But yeah, it was just a missed opportunity in a series of a long series of missed opportunities with this regime.
And my second part to that question is, you know, as we spoke earlier, you know, a good owner in any sports, any business is proactive, right? We talked about being proactive. A good owner gets in that room and says, "Listen, I told you guys you need to win now, but we need to take our future. It's my team, my franchise. You guys are going to be here. I'm going to let you draft. I'm going to let you coach, but we're gonna get our quarterback and we're going to stash him because it's the number 3 pick in the draft, and we don't know if we're going to be drafting here again, and we don't know if we're going to have that kind of talent sitting there at number 3 again. I love your cornerback, Okudah, but my guy will be here for 10 to 12 years, and how much value does a number 3 a quarterback, a number 3 that plays well? Let's say Justin Herbert turns into an All-Pro, and he's here with the Lions, or Tua. How much value, Brian, does that add to a franchise monetarily?
Oh yeah, no, I mean it's transformational. Obviously, you know, you see with even Stafford when he came into the organization, you know, he took over from a John Kitna, from a Dan Orlovsky. You know, it's just night and day really of what a strong quarterback can do for an organization. You look at, you know, now you're looking at, you know, maybe the Chargers' job is going to be opening up, and, you know, a coach is going to come in and look at this opportunity and say,
yes,
hey, I've got this, like you said, you've got this chance to coach this 20, 22, 23-year-old quarterback for the next 10 to 15 years. And you get to, you know, how could you ask for a better building block from that? And, you know, you look at it compared to a situation like the Lions where, you know, Stafford's 31, 32, and, you know, has this a little bit of an injury history. It's just
and he's never won.
You're going to have to find, ultimately, regardless of, you know, how great or how not great you find Stafford, you're going to have to find your own quarterback as this next coach. So, you know, would you rather have a 23-year-old, you know, generational quarterback like Justin Herbert, who he's shown to be, you know, on pace for 4,500 passing yards, 40 touchdowns as a rookie or something like that? You know, would you rather have that, or would you be in a position where, okay, well, I guess we just have to try to find this next guy, whoever it may be? And so, yeah, it's tough for the Lions at this point. You know, if Okudah ends up great, that's great, but, you know, the impact that a cornerback can make does not have, nearly obviously the impact that a franchise quarterback can make.
Yeah, and I don't think fans see this because they're most fans are just about rooting for the team and they want them to win, but they don't see that drafting a generational quarterback at 3. Let's say the Lions are worth $2 billion. He can make the Lions worth $3 billion. So if I'm an owner, and Brian, if you're an owner, you got to think about that, don't you? At number 3.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you see what Tom Brady completely turned around.
Yes.
Obviously, you can't expect to find a Tom Brady. But,
yeah.
The impact that Tom Brady had in the Patriots organization and on Robert Kraft's bank account is, I'm sure, immeasurable.
I know. That's what when you see these debates on social media, like why would you take a quarterback? I don't think fans look at it that way. I mean, if you're an owner and you can make your team worth $3 billion versus $2 billion because you took one guy and he's going to take you over the top versus a guy that never took you over the top. And there's another thing fans don't see is when you watch games on Sunday Night Football and you watch games on Monday Night Football and you see these teams and you see the promos to the game, Brian, I'm sure you see them all the time. You never see a Detroit Lion player in those promos, right? You always see other players. So you take a transitional guy at 3 that can win for you. Who are you going to start seeing in those promos? You're going to start seeing more of the Detroit Lions. And what does that do? That makes your team worth more money, the more exposure. And as an owner, you've got to think of that. And that's why, to me, this whole process, they're going to try to find a guy that's going to keep Matthew Stafford here for another year or two. That's what they're going to do, Brian. I don't know if you agree with that, but I really believe that.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how their priorities lay out, but ultimately, I think that one of the things within the book is that whoever they do land upon, that's going to be a conversation that obviously happens, and I think that will be, I'm sure a key conversation that happens, and depending on who they end up landing on, I think that you do have to look at what's the next step for this organization, and I don't know. As big of a Stafford supporter I have been over the years, I don't know that he's necessarily going to fit in that, how are we going to move this organization from, this historically losing organization? How are we going to transform this if we're just going to continue doing the same things and just running the same things back?
Yeah, and
so I think that's a conversation they're going to need to have.
Yeah, and I think we can both agree. We both pull for Matthew Stafford. We really do. He's a good guy. He's a good dude. He's got great talent. But, great talent doesn't win playoff games, doesn't win divisions, doesn't win Super Bowls, right? It takes more than that. So, last question for me: future in broadcasting. I noticed a few months ago the Orlando Magic they fired the radio crew, and they're going to simulcast the TV and radio as one. So, as you know, when you watch a game on TV, you hear it differently. When you listen to the game on the radio, which I prefer radio, you're listening to it differently. They're painting more of a picture. Do you see that being the future in broadcasting? Because I'm not a big fan of that.
Yeah, no, I also was not a fan of that because, like you said, it's completely different skill set. I don't know if it's you can easily transfer a TV guy to radio because, like you said, you're painting this picture without being able to see it. And I think that obviously, within Detroit, we've been very spoiled with the radio announcers that we've had over the years.
Yes.
Ken Kell, Dan Miller.
Yep.
We've been
Mario
really
Bamba or Dan Dickerson. Excuse me.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, then you look at the wings of their TV guys with Ken Daniels and Mickey Redmond. You can't ask for anything better than that. But I think that, like I said, it's completely different skill sets, and I don't know if I would appreciate moving away from that because, like you said, it's completely different audiences. Really, if you're not able to see it, it's you have to have it described differently to you. So to combine those teams would be, I think, misguided, and you'd be taking away a lot of the experience from fans.
How do you see? Last question. How do you see COVID affecting sports? I know it's probably a long answer, but again, here with they fired the radio crew. My guess, and maybe your guess as well too, it had to do with money because of COVID in sports. Well, how do you see COVID in the next 3 years affecting sports from top to bottom?
Yeah, and I mean, with my experience with the Mudhens, I think that one of the more unfortunate things that you're going to see is kind of a consolidating of minor leagues. Some of these teams are going to drop off, and with that happening, obviously, when one team drops off, that is a ton of jobs that are lost and a ton of opportunities that are lost for people that want to break into the industry. And so, to lose those, not only are you losing those job opportunities, you're losing what are pillars of the community, the Mudhens and, minor league teams all across the country. They really are fixtures within these communities. Toledo obviously does not have a professional sports team outside of minor league sports. So if they were to lose like the Mudhens or the Walleye, you're losing a huge element of, community involvement and, really just an avenue of entertainment. And so I think that unfortunately, again, you're going to see a lot of these teams drop off. And, one of the other things that I've seen happening is that, as organizations kind of trim themselves and become a little bit leaner, you're going to find people stretched even more thin. And, within the world of sports, you're wearing so many different hats as it is. And you're just going to see that continue to grow, unfortunately. People are going to be asked to do a lot more because, that's what the budget calls for, I guess. So, it's really unfortunate, and I think that it's going to make an industry which is already difficult to break into, it's going to make it even more so difficult, unfortunately.
I know. And one of my big pet peeves, and when you watch a game or you listen to a game, and you see a lot of guys that go to school for this, to whether it's Spec Howards, whether it's college or intern, or you see them doing all that and spending the money and doing the grind and all that stuff, and then you turn on a game and it's a sports guy, maybe a color, doing color commentary or on the sidelines versus a guy that's been there. Does that bug you a little bit? For me, I'm not in the industry, but for me it bugs me a little bit. And I understand having a sports guy there that can lend to the conversation, but doesn't it bug you a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a difficult thing to overcome because obviously, there's an insight that can be provided by professional players that is not able to be replicated, without that actual experience. And, you see that go one way with a Tony Romo, who I think is generally regarded as, one of the best broadcasters in sports right now. Or you can see it go the other way with a Booger McFarland on Monday Night Football, who, was just, you could have replaced him with anyone. It felt like it probably would have been an addition, or even Jason Witten that year. It was just, it's tough to see that. And I think that there is definitely a mix that you can find that would be, perfect. Would be, you look at the Monday Night Football broadcasting booths of the past. You look at Howard Cosell, Al Michaels, and Don Meredith. I think is generally regarded as perhaps the best trio. And you have that perfect blend of people that came up and wanted to work within this, that went to school to do this. You have that blend with that actual professional experience within the sport. And so I think that is probably my ideal booth would look like. And to touch back on it with the Red Wings, you have Ken Daniels and Mickey Redmond. You have Mickey Redmond to provide this professional insight and to provide the color, and you have Ken Daniels, who obviously is one of the greats within broadcasting, and he grew up and kind of worked his way up to get to this kind of role. So I think that is probably the ideal mix for me. And like I said, it's just unfortunate when you see just opportunity after opportunity handed out to professional players over maybe someone who is probably better suited for the role.
You bring up Howard Cosell, you're going back to my youth, Brian. I'll tell you that for sure. So, listen, I've keeping you longer than I promised you, and but you're just an interesting guy, and I could have talked to you all day for sure. So, tell them again where they can find the book and where they can find you.
Yeah, so you go on Amazon, search Your Hired, A Guide to Working in Sports. That's going to be the best way to find it. And then on Twitter, on Instagram, find me at Brian, Brian Rzeppa, Rzeppa. You can ask me anything about, working in sports, the process of writing a book, getting published, things like that. I'll be happy to help you through anything.
And I think you would agree to this, that if you are listening, you want to get into sports, don't get discouraged. I think there's a path there. It may take longer, but don't get discouraged, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, I think that from working in it myself and through the process of going and writing this book, I think that, one of the things that people really need to focus on is this the right path for me, or do I want to just be a sports fan? Do I want to not have this be my way of life? There's certainly nothing wrong with just, turning off the game after 3 hours and that's your involvement in sports, because I think that, sports is that working in sports is certainly a grind. And you need to be prepared to have your passion tested. And so, I guess read the book to feed my ego here too. Read the book, see if this is, something that you think that is going to be the right path for you. But ultimately, yeah, if you want to make a career within this industry, the opportunities are out there.
All right, Brian, great. Thank you again. And whenever you're in the area, please stop by and grab a slice. And I was hoping to meet you in person, but we will one day when these COVID numbers slow down.
That sounds great to me. I'm looking forward to it, and thanks for having me on.
Best of luck. Have a great day, buddy.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye. All right, man. Thank you to Brian Rzeppa there. I could have talked to him all day, especially about the Lions, but we don't want to pour salt on the wound right now. But me, being a sports guy, I look at the business end of a lot of things because I'm a business guy. Whether I'm a small-time pizza guy, I'm a business guy. Got to look at the business end of it. And when you talk number 3 pick, man, that's a lot of pepperoni to give up when you don't take a quarterback over a cornerback. So, anyways, check out the past shows on YouTube or iTunes. L. Bubba Baker, Dan Miller. So many names I'm leaving out, but Eddie Murray, former Lion, Greg Campy, Sean Belizean, check them all out, and please subscribe and share. And everyone, take care, be safe, and talk to you soon. Bye bye.